Well, folks, as we've been talking about, there's an enormous amount of bad news happening in the world. Obviously, a group of horrifying people apparently were not only celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder, but we now have evidence that there are people who may, in fact, have been thinking about abetting in Charlie's murder, and we'll get to all that in a minute. But I want to start off with the uplifting, because the truth is that the legacy that Charlie leaves, the thing that he leaves behind, is a massive group of people, all of whom are interested in forwarding his legacy, in making his voice even bigger. One of those people is, of course, the Vice President of the United States. Charlie Kirk and the Vice President were very, very close. In fact, the Vice President had tweeted out that Charlie was very involved in him becoming the Vice President in the first place. He'd become personal friends, Charlie did, with the Vice President when he was in the Senate. And then he'd essentially mentioned to the Trump family and to President Trump that JD would make a great Vice President. So yesterday, JD actually did Charlie's podcast, which is unprecedented, right? Having a sitting Vice President of the United States filling in on the show of someone else. I've never heard of anything like that. JD did a fabulous job. He opened by paying tribute to Charlie Kirk.
JD Vance here, live from my office in the White House complex and filling in for somebody who cannot be filled in for, but I'm going to try to do my best. My dear friend, the great Charlie Kirk. The last several days have been extremely hard for our country. They've been hard for me, hard for my family, hard for the countless people in this building who knew and loved Charlie Kirk. And of course, they've been hardest most of all for his darling wife, Erica, and their two beautiful children. The thing is, every single person in this building, we owe something to Charlie. He was a joyful warrior for our country. He loved America. He devoted himself tirelessly to making our country a better place. He was a critical part of getting Donald Trump elected as president, getting me elected as vice president. And so much of our success over the last 7 months is due to his efforts, his staffing, his support, and his friendship.
And JD spent a lot of time with various members of the cabinet, parts of the Trump administration, talking about Charlie. But he had a couple of, I think, very relevant messages, considering how many people have been coming out of the woodwork and legitimately celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk. He said, listen, I'm hearing a lot of people in the media talking about unity, talking about how we need to get together and have a kumbaya moment. And listen, unity is a good thing with people who are willing to reach across the aisle and engage in normal discussions and conversations. But if you're celebrating assassination, if you're celebrating murder, there can be no unity with you. The Vice President is totally right about this.
There is no unity with people who scream at children over their parents' politics. There is no unity with someone who lies about what Charlie Kirk said in order to excuse his murder. There is no unity with someone who harasses an innocent family the day after the father of that family lost a dear friend. There is no unity with the people who celebrate Charlie Kirk's assassination. And there is no unity with the people who fund these articles, who pay the salaries of these terrorist sympathizers, who argue that Charlie Kirk, a loving husband and father, deserved a shot to the neck because he spoke words with which they disagree.
I mean, can't say it better than that. The Vice President of the United States also said that we have to be honest about who's been financing these movements, who is celebrating, who is cheering, because those are people with whom you cannot have disagreements. You cannot engage in a democratic republic with people who cheer if you get murdered. You can't. It's not possible. Here's the Vice President.
Did you know that the George Soros Open Society Foundation and the Ford Foundation, the groups who funded that disgusting article justifying Charlie's death, do you know they benefit from generous tax treatment? They are literally subsidized by you and me, the American taxpayer. And how do they reward us? By setting fire to the house built by the American family over 250 years. I am desperate for our country to be united in condemnation of the actions and the ideas that killed my friend. I want it so badly that I will tell you a difficult truth. We can only have it with people who acknowledge that political violence is unacceptable, and when we work to dismantle the institutions that promote violence and terrorism in our own country.
Okay, and that last point is going to come up in a little while when we discuss those systems, because it turns out there are legitimately groups out there that foment violence. Now, again, I want to begin with the inspiring here because Charlie leaves extraordinary legacy behind him. And Charlie's boots cannot be filled under any circumstance. His chair cannot be filled. Everyone knows this. It's going to require all of us to pick up where Charlie left off. I mean, that's now everyone's job. I was at the airport yesterday, and a person walked up to me and said, thanks for what you're doing. I said, no, thanks for what you're going to do, because we all have to get in this fight together. It's the only way. Charlie was such a seminal figure. He was so important a figure. He was such an effective activist and fighter. It's going to take everybody getting involved. Well, you can see that all over the globe, not just in the United States, all over the globe, people are celebrating Charlie's memory. People are trying to pick up the baton. Tommy Robinson over in the UK, who has led the movement against the infiltration of the UK by third world people who do not like the British way of life, he led thousands of people in the UK in a moment of silence for Charlie Kirk.
To Charlie's family, we all pray for you, and we hope we honour his life. And you'll know when the minute's up, because the bagpipes will play.
See, thousands of people in the UK, that's not even a country that Charlie was from, celebrating him. Here's an aerial view, by the way, of the March to Unite the Kingdom, which again is the march that paid homage to Charlie. Here are people chanting Charlie's name while carrying the Union Jack. That assassin's bullet did not squash, did not kill Charlie Kirk's voice. It only made it bigger. It only spread it more broadly. In South Korea, South Koreans were chanting on behalf of Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk! We are Charlie Kirk!
They're chanting, "We are Charlie Kirk" in South Korea, where Charlie had recently visited. Meanwhile, prime ministers of foreign nations, presidents of foreign nations, paying homage to Charlie Kirk. George Meloni over in Italy points out that the only reason to shoot somebody is because you fear people who have better arguments than you.
Semplicemente si sedeva in pubblico.
She says he would sit in public and allow anyone to challenge him, to debate on any topic, because he was convinced of his ideas. He did it with a smile on his face, he did it with respect, and he was killed for it. Because when you have no arguments, you fear those who do. I've seen it happen many times. That is Giorgia Meloni of Italy. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, of course, Charlie was perhaps the foremost defender of Israel on college campuses. You can go back and watch copious numbers of videos of him defending the state of Israel, particularly in the face of the terrorism of Hamas in the October 7th war. Here's Benjamin Netanyahu reading Charlie Kirk's letter that he sent to him about defending Judeo-Christian civilization.
He wrote me a letter on May 2nd this year. He said, "One of my greatest joys as a Christian is advocating for Israel and forming alliances to defend Judeo-Christian civilization." A few weeks before the tragedy yesterday, I called him and I spoke to him and I said, "Please come to Israel." I invited him to Israel. And sadly, that visit will not take place. But he was a defender of our common Judeo-Christian civilization. He was unbelievably excited to walk in the footsteps of Jesus here. He valued our bond, the bond between America and Israel.
That is why there are gigantic monuments popping up to Charlie Kirk in Israel. There's a square in Netanya, which is one of the northern coastal cities, that's now being named for Charlie Kirk. Now, new details are emerging about the shooter in this particular case. The suspect appeared to have confessed in a Discord chat, according to the Washington Post. According to two people familiar with the chat and screenshots obtained by the Washington Post, he said, quote, "Hey guys, I have bad news for you all. It was me at UVU yesterday. I'm sorry for all of this." A member of the group chat shared an image of the conversation with the Post and confirmed it came from the shooter's account. The person spoke on the condition of anonymity out of fear of harassment. Discord provided a copy of the message with the confession to the authorities, according to a person familiar with the company's interaction with law enforcement. And meanwhile, we now have some fairly shocking reports about exactly what led to all of this. According to FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, he believes that it's pretty clear what led to this. Quote, I think it's pretty clear based on the statements of family members, friends, and some of the messaging we have on these digital footprints left behind that Robinson, Tyler Robinson, the shooter, clearly had some obsession with Charlie Kirk. Bongino said, Charlie's obviously a conservative commentator. I think it's fairly obvious to everyone out there. There's no need to parse words with it, that clearly this was an ideologically motivated attack. But Dan went even further. He actually said, it appears that there were people who may have known in advance that Tyler Robinson was going to do this. Here's what Dan Bongino, Deputy Director of the FBI, had to say.
There appear to have been multiple warning signs. You just laid out some of them. There were people in his network, friends and family, who had stated that he had become more political, that he had become, at some parts, I believe some of his coworkers had stated that he had kind of detached himself when the topic of politics came up and walked away from them. Family members said he'd become more political, leading us to believe that this ideology had infected him and had taken over. And he was just intent, it appears, from the data we've accumulated and the channel and that note, which we have some evidence may have existed before based on the communications in that channel, that his target was obviously going to be Charlie and that people knew in advance. The question is, again, I just want to go back to what you had asked before. Did they know? Were they sure of this? Or did they hear this and just write it off? That's what we're going to have to find out.
And that is a huge question because obviously there are loosely associated or tightly associated groups of transgender-oriented, left-wing political, ex-Mormon furries. I mean, like, it's a bizarre melange, apparently. I mean, I was told by my own security today, actually, that some members of groups that have been associated with the investigation that's currently ongoing have been issuing threats to other public figures, myself included. According to Aaron Siberium over at the Free Beacon, the Federal Bureau of Investigation is investigating social media posts by at least 7 different accounts that appeared to indicate foreknowledge of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, according to 3 people familiar with the investigation, as well as screenshots obtained by the Washington Free Beacon. The posts, one of which referenced the date of Kirk's assassination, September 10th, more than a month before it took place, were all deleted in the days following the killing. Several of the accounts appear to belong to transgender individuals. At least one of them followed suspect Tyler Robinson's roommate, with whom Robinson was allegedly in a relationship on TikTok. The FBI has received archived copies of the posts, according to a person who flagged them for the agency. Screenshots of the posts have been circulating online. They had not been previously authenticated. While the posts don't establish that the individuals knew or conspired with the shooter, several of them mention Charlie Kirk by name and fantasize about him dying. Quote, it would be funny if someone like Charlie Kirk got shot on September 10th, LMAO. One X account posted on September 3rd. Another account posted on August 6th, more than a month before the shooting, that, quote, September 10th will be a very interesting day. After Kirk's assassination, the account followed up, quote, I plead the 5th. That morbid quip was reposted by an account called Churbum75M, who appears to follow Robinson's roommate, Lance Twiggs, on TikTok, where Twiggs' username is Lancelotl. Minutes after Kirk was pronounced dead, Churbum75M posted on X, quote, we effing did it. Several of the accounts under investigation appear to be associated with LGBT subcultures. One individual, Osamu bin Tizuku, used the X handle Fujo Shinsel, a reference to the genre of anime that depicts romantic relationships between men. Another user, who had wished death to Kirk and predicted something big will happen, had identified as non-binary on X. Apparently, a video posted on TikTok the night before the shooting, an individual who appears to be transgender wrote, quote, Charles James Kirk does not know what's coming tomorrow. And then added, this isn't a threat, it's a promise. I mean, it would be one hell of a coincidence if those were not people who were coordinating or hearing about this or had a feeling this was going to happen and said nothing about it. Now, it may not be a crime for them to have stayed silent beforehand, but if you delete evidence that you stayed silent beforehand, that actually could theoretically be obstruction of justice. Okay, bottom line is that there are very dangerous cells of people who are associated with fringe acts and who believe themselves to be victims and therefore are willing to legitimize violence and or help it out, cheer it on. Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, he says that it's pretty clear who did this. The DNA from the tail and a screwdriver that were found with the rifle match the DNA of the shooter.
And what we learned was there was evidence, DNA evidence that could be collected and had been collected, including a screwdriver that was found on the rooftop. Also, we went over to the scene in the wooded area where the firearm was discarded. And the firearm had a towel wrapped around it. It's important. I'll get back to that later. I even walked into the wooded area in the ravine, so I knew from my investigative experience what I could bring to the table and what decisions I needed to make. And having the support of President Trump and the full support of the White House was what we needed for these resources to happen. And I can report today that the DNA hits from the towel that was wrapped around the firearm and the DNA on the screwdriver are positively processed for the suspect in custody.
Okay, meanwhile, Patel also said that we have a note in which he said he was going to do it.
His family has collectively told investigators that he subscribed to left-wing ideology, and even more so in these last couple of years. And he had a text message exchange, he, the suspect, with another individual, in which he claimed that he had an opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and he was going to do it because of his hatred for what Charlie stood for. Those are factually accurate investigatory findings by the FBI that we've handed over to the local authorities and the federal authorities to make their prosecutorial decisions.
Now, the reaction from the left has come in a variety of forms. Form number one is just denying that this is even happening, denying there's any association with left-wing causes or ideologies for the shooter, just pretending that none of this is happening. So, for example, former Homeland Security official Donald Harvin said on CNN that actually the law enforcement and Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, should not have shared information about the trans lover living with the shooter because, it's not helpful. And by helpful, he means not helpful to covering up the ideology of the shooter.
I wonder what you make of the reporting that the suspect was carrying on a romantic relationship with a roommate who happens to be transgender, and how that is now being spun to suggest that that has something to do with this. At this point, it's unclear that it does, but how do investigators determine that?
The first thing I want to be on record saying is that I think that's not only helpful for the investigation to put that out, but it's not really helpful for the tone and tenor of the radicalization of our country right now. We've seen time and time again over the last year how people of the trans community have been blamed for a whole host of things. And so I think that putting that out there, and if you look online like I do, you see a lot of people picking that up on the far right. They're looking to demonize and blame trans people. It's not helpful.
Well, I mean, knowledge is helpful. Knowing things is helpful. Looking at trans ideology as a whole and deciding whether or not it bubbles with violence, that's helpful, I feel like. I feel like targeting incel, furry, ex-Mormon, violent groups, that might be helpful, I feel. I feel like there's something that's helpful. Like, you don't seem like maybe this is why you're a former Homeland Security official. Meanwhile, MSNBC criminologist Casey Jordan said, there's really no theme to the writings that were on the bullet casings. There were no themes at all. Like notices bulges, OWO. I mean, what could that refer to? Who knows? It's a mystery wrapped in a penis.
I would need to actually see these words in the way that they are on the bullet casings in the gun to make a proper interpretation. But just knowing what those words are, I'm kind of overwhelmed with how immature it all sounds, and that there is no really chronic theme. I think Brandy really nailed it. You have to make of it what you want, because, it's like these bulges, if you're reading this, you're gay, catch this fascist, or hey fascist, catch. It's like the rantings of a really immature child. And we really need to learn a lot more about what was going on in this accused shooter's life when all of this was happening. Was he in a rabbit hole? Did he have no job? Did he have no purpose? How did he become such a consumer of hate?
I mean, who knows? Again, it's all just a mystery. Meanwhile, CNN terrorism analyst Juliette Kayyem says, do we even care about the motive? Like, really? Like, should we care about it? Like, should it matter what the motive? I mean, yes, it should. And if the motive were reversed, that it would to you.
Well, will the rhetoric get toned down? I mean, again, I go back to what was on the bullet from this kid was fascism, and that's only coming from one side currently in this debate, and it's on every placard and every poster around the country. I mean, I think it's a valid question, but are they going to live up to what they say they're going to do with the Nazi and the fascism and the like?
Do you I don't think we know, just to be clear, I mean, just law enforcement people, I don't think we know the meaning of his message. We know his history.
Bella Ciao is an anti-fascist thing. It says fascists catch this.
Then I'll give you his history. Then I'll give you his history, right? Think about his history. His history, but this is not the.
Why are we debating that?
This is
what
that's
I'm
what I wanted to tell you. This was my point, not yours. This was my point, not yours. The point is, who cares? A man was killed.
What do you mean, who cares a man was killed? I mean, yes, that's why we care. That would be the reason. Meanwhile, Governor Josh Shapiro, who has he's developed a pathological inability to condemn left-wing violence. It's very weird. So he put out a tweet, quote, "No one party is immune from political violence. My family and I can attest to that. Using the rhetoric of rage and calling some of our fellow Americans scum, no matter how profound our differences, only creates more division. It makes it harder to heal. We are at an inflection point in America. Violence transcends party lines, and the way to address it and have true peaceful debate is for leaders to speak and act with moral clarity. That needs to start with the president." He said that in response to Donald Trump pointing out that the problem right now is on the left, which it largely is. And Governor Shapiro should know that, since the person who burned the house that he and his family were in was doing so over Israel. That was not coming from the right. That was coming from the left, obviously. Okay, but that's actually not even the worst form of the response to this news. The worst form continues to be the SETI stream, turning into a gushing river of attacks on Charlie Kirk, on President Trump, justifications of violence. I gotta say, there is a streamer named Destiny. You may remember Destiny from last year when he and I had a debate on Lex Friedman. And, it was friendly enough. I'm a little perturbed to find that apparently Destiny wants us all dead. That seems sort of strange and odd and unpleasant. I mean, he was supposed to be the reasonable liberal, and it turns out that he is totally fine with people getting killed, which is a hell of a take here. Truly a hell of a take. When you say you can't get along with people like this, yes.
You need conservatives to be afraid of getting killed when they go to events so that they look to their leadership to turn down the temperature. The issue is right now, they don't feel like there's any fear. I don't know. It's like memes. It's just memes to everybody, I guess. I don't know, bro. I don't know. I don't care. I'm playing video games. Okay. I'm done today. I don't give a fuck.
So more conservatives need to get killed so they'll understand that the temperature is too high. Is that's the idea here? Solid stuff. Meanwhile, protesters at a Charlie Kirk vigil, one shouted, "I want you to effing die," which, we know that's what you want. We are aware.
I don't want your salvations. Why? I want you to fucking die. We're not gonna give you a second chance, even when you beg for it on your knees, begging and pleading.
So first of all, not good at guitar. Also terrible voice. 2 out of 10 musical skill, but speaks to a broader problem, obviously. Meanwhile, people just lying about Charlie, right? Which is a tacit justification of violence against him. As I've been saying, if your response to someone getting killed in the political realm, who's in the normie political realm, if your response to them is, "Man, too bad they were killed, but," and Charlie was as normie as it comes. If your response to that is to then slander him by attributing to him beliefs he did not have, then I think you are part of the problem. You are fomenting the permission structure for violence. As I've been saying, Jamel Hill, who has just made a joke of herself, honestly. It is shocking to me that at any point she was taken seriously. But she went out there and said that the thing about Charlie is that he believes in the innate superiority of white people. You are a liar. A liar. You are lying. Anybody who knew Charlie knew this. If you consumed Charlie's content, you knew this wasn't true. This is a lie, like an overt, complete lie, soup to nuts lie. And literally, Charlie literally fought a rhetorical war, a flame war with the Groypers who do believe in white superiority. He fought to keep them out of his movement. It was literally called the Groyper War in 2019. It was a thing that happened. I remember it because I was there. And here's Jamel Hill claiming that Charlie was some sort of white supremacist.
The reason he was labeled a white supremacist is because he believed in the superiority of white people, which is why he said that he would be concerned if he saw a black pilot, which is why he said that he questioned the brain processing of brilliant minds such as Joy Ann Reid and Ketanji Brown Jackson, because he ultimately believed in the superiority of white people.
Okay, God, she's such a liar. What he said about the black pilots is he said affirmative action. This is a commonly made argument, by the way. Affirmative action assumes that black people need extra points in order to achieve the same results as a person who is not black. And what that does is it seeds doubt in the minds of people who then see black people in particular slots. And that's unfair to the black people. That was the argument that Charlie was making. That black people aren't inferior and therefore don't need extra points to become pilots, for example. They don't need DEI to become good pilots. And when you stack DEI on top of the meritocracy, what you end up with is a false perception of the inferiority of particular peoples. It was anti-racist, what Charlie was saying. And as far as his point about Ketanji Brown Jackson or Joy Reid not being particularly bright, because they're not. It turns out they're a bunch of white people who are dumb also, but these happen to be black people who are dumb. Who cares? Charlie didn't do that because of the race. He did that because they're dumb. It's amazing. Meanwhile, Don Lemon, he too is very upset with all the tributes being paid to Charlie. So Don Lemon, who couldn't hold down that job over at CNN, and who now has a viewership of apparently my viewers, because I think that's his only viewership is when we play his clips on my show. Here is Don Lemon, who is tearing into Charlie.
The things that came out of Charlie Kirk's mouth were much of it was hurtful, discriminatory, ignorant, and I'll stop there, to say the least.
Well, I mean, if Don Lemon says so, then it must be false. Meanwhile, a pastor named Howard John Wesley at the Alfred Street Baptist Church in D.C. went viral over the course of the last 48 hours for issuing a massive rebuke of Charlie Kirk, basically saying that your death does not justify your life. Here we go.
But I'm overwhelmed to see the nation's flag fly at half staff for a man who was a proud racist and spent his entire life sowing seeds of division and hatred into this land. And then these hypocrites with selective rage who are mad about Charlie Kirk but didn't say anything about Melissa Hortman and her husband when they were gunned down in their living room. Tell me that I ought to have compassion for the death of a man who never showed compassion or respect for my life. Y'all, there's nowhere in Bible we are told to honor evil. And I know I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but how you died does not redeem how you lived.
How disgusting. Truly disgusting. Nothing he said there is true. And it's this kind of rhetoric. I mean, he called Charlie evil right there. Evil. Right? Not ISIS. Not Hamas. Charlie Kirk. Evil. And again, this is all part and parcel of the far left's attempt to paint everybody who is on the right as the worst version of evil. And Representative Jasmine Crockett was on the Breakfast Club with Charlemagne and defended herself, calling Trump a wannabe Hitler. And again, it's this sort of line that Trump is Hitler that leads people to believe, hey, maybe if he's Hitler, you know what should have happened to Hitler. Now, here's Jasmine Crockett cooling the temperature by 0 degrees.
we've got to talk about like what it means when you're running for president or you're running for one of these higher offices and you go out there and you talk about beating people up. You go out there and you say things like, I could shoot somebody in the middle of the street in New York and I could still win. We got to talk about like that. That is next level. Me disagreeing with you, me calling you, you know, I want to be Hitler. All those things are like not necessarily saying go out and hurt somebody. But when you're literally telling people at rallies, yeah, beat them up and that kind of stuff, like you are promoting like a culture of violence. So we need to talk about like what it looks like when you don't promote a culture of violence.
Well, I mean, you say that you're not promoting a culture of violence by defending yourself, calling Trump a wannabe Hitler. So this brings us to the left-wing response that is sort of the normie left-wing response. And that is a sort of generic rejection of political violence. So Nancy Pelosi, she came out and said, you know, people don't have any intention to lead to something dangerous. I mean, we just, you know, no more political violence. Political violence, no more.
People don't have any intention of saying something that's going to lead to something dangerous, but we cannot take responsibility for the minds that are out there and how they hear it.
No responsibility. You see, Pete Buttigieg came out, he said, we have to reject those who celebrate political violence, which, again, on a sort of anodyne level is correct, but it doesn't go far enough. It doesn't go nearly far enough.
In order to turn the tide of political violence, yes, we have to reject those who commit political violence. Yes, we have to reject those who celebrate or promote political violence. But also, in order to deprive political violence of its power, we have to reject anyone who would try to exploit political violence. The response to this cannot be for the government to crack down on individuals or groups, not because of violence, but because they challenge the government politically.
Okay, so here is what an actual real response would look like. Senator John Fetterman, who is apparently the only sane person in the Democratic Party, or at least one of the few, he said the reality. So yesterday, he was on CNN, and he said, you know what? Trump isn't an autocrat. I don't agree with him. He's not an autocrat. Yes, thank you. It's not that tough. Thank you.
When you hear some Democrats saying Trump is acting like an autocrat.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. If you actually compare him to an actual autocrat, that is not just that. Now, last night, for example, people were complaining. They were protesting about, oh, that's the Hitler thing. You just don't ever compare anyone to Hitler and those kinds of extreme things. And now look what happened to Charlie Kirk. I mean, you know, the man was shot. Now we have to turn the temperature down. It's like we can't compare people to these kinds of figures in history. And this is not an autocrat. This is a product of a democratic election.
It's not that hard. John Fetterman can do it. That senator, the only, he may be the only sane Democratic senator left, truly. Was that so difficult? Was that so difficult? Well, meanwhile, there's been a lot of talk on the left about the evils of cancel culture, and they're very, very upset. They're very upset about cancel culture all of a sudden. Why? Well, because longtime Washington Post writer Karen Attia was fired. And she says she was fired from the publication's opinions department. She should have been fired long ago. She's a terrible columnist. For, quote, speaking out against political violence, racial double standards, and America's apathy toward guns. Well, that's not actually what happened. What actually happened is that she quoted Charlie Kirk falsely. That's what actually happened. What actually happened is that she went on Blue Sky and she misquoted Charlie on affirmative action. Here's what she said, quote, black women do not have the brain processing power to be taken seriously. You have to go steal a white person's slot. Charlie Kirk. Okay, that is wrong. Charlie was quoting someone saying that to reject it. That is what got her fired, because she basically falsified a quote about Charlie with regard to Charlie that, again, treats him as though he's a racist. So should she be fired? Yeah, I mean, she's a journalist. So yeah, she's an opinion writer. And that is not cancel culture. Now, I've been pretty consistent about this because I think that, again, the consequences of saying vile things in the real world, those are real consequences and they exist. And we have to be pretty careful about where we apply those consequences. But we shouldn't pretend that there should be no consequences in the real world when people say vile things, and not all things are created equal. I'm not a moral relativist. I do not think that saying truly awful things is the same as saying a boy is not a girl, for example. I'm not going to play the moral relativist game because I don't think it's accurate. By the same token, I do not think that it is a good idea to speak the way that the Attorney General Pam Bondi spoke yesterday. Now, the Trump administration is talking about doing some effective things to clamp down on groups that actually do foment violence. So, for example, J.D. Vance had Stephen Miller on Charlie's show yesterday. And Stephen was talking about dismantling NGOs that advocate for violence, which, of course, you can do. I mean, advocating for violence, inciting violence is, in fact, a crime, and you can shut down organizations that involve themselves in that. That is a violation of law.
I want to be mindful of time here. A lot of people are very worried about how we got here in the first place. And you have the crazies on the far left who are saying, oh, Stephen Miller and J.D. Vance, they're going to go after constitutionally protected speech. No, we're going to go after the NGO network that foments, facilitates, and engages in violence. That's not okay. Violence is not okay in our system, and we want to make it less likely that that happens.
Chip Roy over in Congress doing the same thing. He's trying to launch a select committee to probe radical left organizations that foment violence. He said, quote, we've seen dangerous networks like Antifa organize, fund, and deploy sophisticated terror campaigns attacking law enforcement and destroying American cities. We have seen George Soros, the Wren Collective, and other radical organizations funding and putting in place district attorneys and judges to then coordinate releasing criminals to the streets. Enough is enough. We must follow the money to identify the perpetrators of coordinated anti-American assaults being carried out against us and take all steps under the law necessary to stop them. He says we can no longer pretend to be bound together by shared ideals when a well-funded vitriolic cadre of our fellow Americans and foreign interests are at war with the very values of faith in God, fidelity to our Constitution, and respect for the principles of liberty and Western civilization that define us as Americans, including, notably, the free speech practiced and exemplified by Charlie Kirk. So again, that is not Chip Roy calling for an end to free speech. The idea there is that there is actual crime, actual violence, conspiracy to commit violent acts being perpetuated by particular groups and paid for by other groups, and that should be investigated. That's perfectly well within bounds and totally worthwhile. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, articulated this in as poor a way as it's possible to articulate this. She suggested that she is going to unleash the law against hate speech. You can't do this. I'm just going to point out, you can't do this. It's against the First Amendment. It's against the Constitution. There is no category of speech called hate speech because it's a totally malleable category. Until 20 seconds ago, it was considered hate speech to say, as Charlie said, as I've been saying for my entire career, that boys are not girls. So, yeah, we're not going to do this, what Pam Bondi is saying here.
There's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
Well, I do not think that is, no. That's a no from me, dog. It's going to be a no from me. Okay, but there are things that the federal government can do to, for example, investigate groups like Antifa, see where they get their money, use actual law enforcement resources to crack down on violent groups, like apparently the violent group that was online that was coordinating, possibly, to kill Charlie Kirk. But the bottom line is this. There is a difference between the mainstream normie Americans, I think on both sides of the aisle, and what we are seeing that is cropping up everywhere. This permission structure that exists, again, it's a luxury belief, as my friend Rob Henderson says, a luxury belief by elites that violence, political violence, is justified so long as it's people who agree with me. That is not something most Americans go along with. It is not something that we want. I think we can come together around that, but we are going to have to extirpate movements in the United States ideologically and through social pressure. We should extirpate movements that are fundamentally grounded in conspiracy theories about the world, that promote violence because they say the conspiracy can only be fought through mechanisms of violence and that violence is therefore deserved. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, when inflation jumps, when you hear the national debt is over $37 trillion, you ever think maybe now would be a pretty good time to buy some gold? Whether to protect against the dollar's loss in purchasing power, for peace of mind during global instability, or just for a sensible diversification, Birch Gold Group believes every American should own physical gold. So along with the Daily Wire, Birch Gold created something special this month. Through September 30th, if you buy from Birch Gold, you will get a signed copy of my brand new book, Lions and Scavengers, plus your very own golden Ben Shapiro bookmark. Sounds cool. We released an extremely limited number of those autographed books and bookmarks. Text BEN to 989898 to claim your eligibility and start the process. Plus, Birch Gold can help you roll an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. You're still eligible for a signed copy of Lions and Scavengers. I buy my gold from Birch Gold. Tens of thousands of other Lions do as well. It's just the smart thing to do. Is it finally time for you to do it? Well, I mean, I did. Just a few weeks ago, I bought some more gold because, frankly, I'm a little worried about the nature of the economy. Text my name, BEN, to 989898. Claim your eligibility today. Act before September 30th. Again, text BEN to 989898. Also, I always assumed restless sleep was, just inevitable. Tossing, turning, waking up with a bad back. I just figured as I got older, that's what sleep was going to be. And then I tried Helix Sleep, and everything changed. It's been transformative for my sleep quality. Now I easily fall asleep in minutes, even when, the news is relatively distracting or disturbing. What makes Helix different? They don't just sell you a random mattress. They actually match you with the perfect one for your body and sleep style. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, somewhere in between, they've got you covered. They make it so simple to get your best night's sleep every night. All you have to do is take their sleep quiz and get matched with a custom mattress based on your body type and sleep preferences. And trust me, when you find that right match, no wonder how you ever slept on anything else. And I have the firm but breathable mattress, which is exactly what I need because otherwise I get the bad back. Right now, Helix is offering an incredible Labor Day extended sale. Visit helixsleep.com/Ben. Get 25% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Ben for 25% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know we sent you. Again, just visit helixsleep.com/Ben for this exclusive offer. That's helixsleep.com/Ben. Alrighty, meanwhile, speaking of people who are not, in fact, quashing the violent movements of the United States, Zohran Mamdani over in New York, he seems like he is poised to win his mayoral race in New York. Kathy Hochul, the feckless governor of New York, has now endorsed Zohran Mamdani. He, of course, is very excited to have her support, and why wouldn't he be? He's a useless communist who supports terrorism, and he just got the support of the sitting governor of New York. He should be very happy. Never has a more useless person achieved higher office than Zohran Mamdani. It truly is an astonishing thing.
I'm excited to welcome Governor Hochul to our movement and to show the partnership at hand between City Hall and Albany in fighting to make the most expensive city in the United States of America affordable and in fighting back against an authoritarian administration that seeks to tear apart the very fabric of this city.
Yeah, well, great. So glad that the Democratic Party that wants to fight extremism and violence is endorsing a person who, wants to globalize the Intifada. Sounds great. Well, in mildly positive news, apparently Mayor Eric Adams is going to drop out of that mayoral race. According to News 12 Westchester's Tara Rosenblum, Adams' announcement could come by the end of the week. Now, again, it could be too late. It could be that Adams dropping out doesn't give enough time for the consolidation of the rest of the field. Mamdani, of course, has the support of the entire left. Right now, support remains split between Cuomo and Sliwa. If Adams drops out, Curtis is going to have to drop out to give Cuomo a shot to win. That's just the reality. Even if Cuomo dropped out, half of Cuomo's support would then bleed over to Mamdani. With that said, Mamdani is currently the overwhelming favorite to win in New York, demonstrating once again that New Yorkers can seize defeat from the jaws of victory by electing actual communists to high office. Well, meanwhile, the President of the United States continues to move on his anti-crime crusade. He announced yesterday that he would be sending the National Guard to Memphis and New Orleans. He will have legal authority to do that because presumably the governors of both Louisiana and Tennessee are going to not only go along with President Trump's move, they're going to ask him to do it.
We're going to Memphis. Memphis that's the next city. Deeply troubled. And the mayor is happy. He's a Democrat mayor. The mayor is happy. And the governor, Tennessee. The governor is happy. Deeply troubled. We're going to fix that just like we did Washington.
So, again, I think this is a very smart move by Trump. I think shifting focus away from Democrat-run states to Republican-run states and saying, listen, I just want to stop crime. Republican governors are letting me stop crime. Why aren't Democratic governors letting me stop crime? Very, very smart tactic. The president put out a statement on Truth Social, quote, "The only reason crime is somewhat down in Memphis is because the FBI and others in the federal government at my direction have been working there for 5 months on the absolutely terrible crime numbers. Likewise in Chicago and Los Angeles. But the real work by us has barely begun. That happens after we make the official announcement that we're coming. And when we do that, as we did in the very safe Washington, D.C., the no crime miracle begins. Only I can save them. Dun, dun, dun. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump." I added the little trumpet flourish there. But otherwise, the rest of that is President Trump. Meanwhile, again, Senator Fetterman, the only rational person in the Senate for the Democrats, he says, listen, we shouldn't be fighting Trump's National Guard. Are they going to stop crime or are they not going to stop crime?
We're seeing Democratic mayors in Chicago and in Baltimore resist federal help, additional federal help. Is that a good idea to fight Trump on this?
No, what I'll say is, like, I experienced that, it's like I live in Navy Yard. I would walk to work and I would see a lot of National Guard people. It honestly wasn't a big deal. They were friendly. They were standing around. And this wasn't like there was Russian army. This was, it's our sons, our daughters, our fathers, our mothers kind of a thing. If you actually experience it on the ground, it's really not like it's not occupied city or anything.
And so, yeah, he is right. It is maybe John Fetterman for president. I mean, honestly, like the last rational Democrat. Meanwhile, President Trump, for all the talk about President Trump being a racist, he seems to be taking a very strong interest in the murder and beheading of an Indian origin hotel manager, allegedly by a Cuban illegal immigrant in Dallas last week. He went on Truth Social and he commented on the murder of Chandra Muli Nagamalalia, who was 50, attacked with a machete by his co-worker in front of his wife and child after an argument over a broken washing machine. And President Trump put out a statement saying about the perpetrator, this individual was previously arrested for terrible crimes, including child grand theft auto and false imprisonment, but was sent back into our homeland under incompetent Joe Biden because Cuba did not want such an evil person in their country. Rest assured, the time for being soft on these illegal immigrant criminals is over under my watch. Okay, well, again, it's hard to argue that that's not a big win for President Trump. It continues to be a winner for President Trump, obviously. Well, meanwhile, the president continues to say that his patience is running out with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has continued to up the ante over and over and over again with regards to Ukraine. Obviously, just a few days ago, Vladimir Putin flew a bunch of drones into Poland, which is obviously an attempt to sort of probe the defenses of a NATO ally. President Trump said on Fox and Friends that his patience is running out.
Does your patience run out with Putin? Yeah, it's sort of running out and running out fast, but it does take two to tango. It's amazing. When Putin wants to do it, Zelensky didn't. When Zelensky wanted to do it, Putin did. Now Zelensky wants to, and Putin is a question mark. But we're going to have to come down very, very strong.
Okay, so what will strong look like? That remains an open question. The president chided Putin for getting that close to Poland with his drones.
What are you going to do about President Putin? Because we just saw these drones in Poland.
Yeah, well,
more sanctions.
Thing, I'm not going to defend anybody, but the Poland, they were actually knocked down and they fell into an area. But he shouldn't be close to Poland anyway.
Right.
Okay, well, that is right, but there are going to have to be some sort of actual consequences here. The NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, who's been quite allied with President Trump's demands for higher payments from various European states, he said Russia's drone incursion is dangerous and unacceptable, which of course it is.
What happened on Wednesday was not an isolated incident. Russia's recklessness in the air along our eastern flank is increasing in frequency. We have seen drones violate our airspace in Romania, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Whether intentional or not, it is dangerous and unacceptable. At a meeting of the North Atlantic Council on Wednesday morning, allies discussed the situation in light of Poland's request for Article 4 consultations. Allies expressed full solidarity with Poland and denounced Russia's reckless behavior.
President Trump has responded to all of this by saying that he will impose new sanctions on Russia if Europe is willing to cut off getting its oil supply from the Russians, which does make some sense considering, again, that the Russians are buying extraordinary quantities of oil still from a country they are at war with, effectively, in Russia. Here is President Trump saying just that.
Europe they're my friends, but they're buying oil from Russia. So we can't be expected to be the only ones that are, full bore. But Europe is buying oil from Russia. I don't want them to buy oil. And the sanctions that they're putting on are not tough enough. And I'm willing to do sanctions, but they're going to have to toughen up their sanctions commensurate with what I'm doing.
But just to clarify, you wouldn't move ahead until NATO moves ahead.
Well, I'm ready to move ahead, but they have to do it. I think they will. But right now they're talking and they're not doing. Look, they're buying oil from Russia. We're not buying oil from Russia. They're buying a lot of oil from Russia. That's not the deal.
Okay, so he's not wrong about this. Now, the way the United States can help out with this is by subsidizing LNG to Europe. Effectively, a new Marshall Plan that will keep Russia away from its predations in Ukraine, and that will strengthen Europe in the face of the Russian bear, prop up their economies, which is actually not a terrible thing, and also effectively allow the Europeans to get off of Russian oil and make the Europeans, frankly, more dependent on the United States, which is not a terrible idea. That should be a next move to be considered. As long as we're doing state-subsidized trade, that should be something that we consider pretty strongly right now. Alrighty, folks. We will get to the member block in just a moment. Your reminder, you should check out tpusa.com right now. Go help out Charlie. Go help out Charlie's legacy. Obviously, Charlie leaves an enormous legacy behind. It takes everybody to help pick that up and move it forward and be part of his fight. You can go give money. You can go start a chapter, as 18,000 people apparently are attempting to do right now. Some 18,000 chapters they're trying to start up. Pretty impressive stuff so far, but you can be part of that, and you definitely should. So head on over to tpusa.com right now. Alrighty, coming up, we'll get into the latest on the economy. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member and use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.